Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 647, and today's date is April 21st, 2015, and the title of this episode is The U.S. Economy is Collapsing, and the IMF is Moving to Plan B. Let's get right into the economic collapse. Now, the situation in Greece, it is really heating up right now. As we know, the government is going to confiscate local government reserves and basically sweep them into the central bank to provide the country more funds as it approaches another month of huge repayments to the IMF. Now, the ECB is out there and they're saying to reduce central bank risk, they're going to ease their collateral requirements for Greece to set them around 75% or to set them at 90%. The latter two options could be applied if Greece is in an orderly default or under a formal ECB program or a disorderly default. So what are we seeing here? We see that the ECB, the central banking system, they are getting prepared for something to happen. They do believe that Greece is going to exit and they're getting ready. We see the European Center for International Political Economy in Brussels and the EU chair noted that the Greek situation is completely isolated. It will not affect anything. Don't worry about it. And like I said in the past, every time a government official, central banker comes out and tells you it's okay, everything is fine, it's contained, it's isolated, think about it. These are all the words they always use when there's a disaster headed our way. I mean, think back to 2007 going into 2008. The subprime securities, they're contained. Bear Stearns is isolated. It's the same thing they're telling us once again, and this lets us know that something major is about to happen. We see that Germany is also very confident that Europe won't take any risk to endanger global economy. The Eurozone has basically overcome all the crises that were apparent in the last couple of years, and there is absolutely no contagion whatsoever. I mean, seriously, they're really trying to convince us right now that everything has been solved. But here in the United States, it seems the White House is a little bit more concerned right now. Advisor Jason Furman says a Greek exit from the Eurozone would present very large and unnecessary risk for global economy. He also said that the Greek exit involves a large tail risk, could impede investment, create uncertainty in the markets, and threaten economic recovery. Yes, this is going to be a disaster. It might not seem that way right in the beginning because you have to remember the banking committee decided, you know what, if Greek exits and they default on their loan, it's really not a default. We really don't have to pay up at this time. And in the beginning, when this does occur, nothing might happen. And then as we go down the line and other countries say, you know something? We can do the same thing. This is when the problem's going to hit. And we see when all this is happening at the same time, Greece is looking at Russia. They may sign a gas link accord. And guess what? They might pivot to Russia. Russia will guarantee 47 BCM per year of gas via Greece with the limit to be built by Russian European Group at a cost of about 2 billion euros. Russia right now basically is waiting for the official admission from Greece that it will pivot to them. And we can see right now that they are ready to go. Gazprom CEO Miller comments on GasLink to EU on Russian TV, saying that Greek section of GasLink to EU to cost about 2 billion euros. GasLink to EU may be built by Russia. Russia guarantees transit. We see Gazprom is saying that, yeah, we might forward them money in advance. So they might be receiving about $5 billion or so in funds to help out. And they might use this to maybe pay off the IMF and then exit or not pay off the IMF, just default and exit. So we can see right now that the gas transit guarantees will help Greece to get additional commercial credits for other projects. Now out in Germany, we see the ZEW Investor, ZEW, Investor Expectation Index fell for the first time in 6 months. This is not a good sign. We see here in the United States, there are more layoffs that are coming down the line. Baker Hughes is going to cut their workforce by 17%. Texas, which has recently served as the country's post-crisis job creation engine, is completely falling apart. It has suffered now around 47,000 layoffs, or more than 3 times the number of job cuts posted by the next closest state. Baker Hughes is going to be laying off around 10,500 people. This is a lot of people. And we can see that this is the worst and the most layoffs since 2009. But we see more layoffs around the world and the country. Aberdeen Proving Ground, 100 contractors. Frito-Lay facility in Williamsport, 500. Halliburton, 9,000 jobs in the last 6 months. Jack Cooper Transport Company, 95 layoffs. U.S. Street warns of about 1,400 potential layoffs. Nassau Coliseum, 2,500 part-time summer layoffs notices. MarketBot, 20% of its workforce is going to be laid off. Whirlpool, 1,300 jobs. Schlumberger, another 11,000 jobs worldwide. IBM right now is reporting the worst sales since 2002. Revenues of $19.6 billion were the worst since the first quarter of 2002. The annual collapse in revenue is just shy of that recorded during the financial crisis, with another consecutive year-to-year 11.9% drop in a row. If this revenue keeps dropping, we're going to see major layoffs in IBM. We're seeing it in many companies right now. We're seeing retail lay off people, close up shop. The situation is getting worse and worse as time goes on. Even in the real estate industry, we see mortgage applications completely declining. We see that mortgage companies, mortgage departments, they're continually laying off people. And of course, as we know, they're pushing their new program of 3% down. We'll accept subprime people. Banks are saying 0% down will make up the closing costs. We just want to boost the market up. Investment companies, hedge funds are continually purchasing houses using cash to keep this market alive. But the one problem that we're seeing is that everything is not making sense. Lumber prices plunging to fresh 3-year lows. Lumber sales, 3-year lows. Something is going on. Something is not making sense because the government is telling us that retail is rebounding. The corporate media is out there telling us that real estate is improving. But we see people continually holding on to their homes for longer and longer. They cannot sell it. They're coming down on their prices month after month, trying to find someone to purchase their homes. So we see lumber right now does not match what the new builders are telling us, what the government is telling us, and what the corporate media is telling us. And we can see at this point, we're getting to that point where housing is completely falling apart. The U.S. government, the central bankers, they know this. They know the economy is falling apart. This is why they're pushing war around the globe, and they're not going to stop. We see something very strange in J.P. Morgan Chase. Letters are apparently going out to some J.P. Morgan Chase customers announcing that cash will be prohibited from being stored in the bank's safety deposit boxes. And it reads as follows. Contents of the box. You agree not to store any cash or coins other than those found to have a collectible value. Another change is the signature will no longer be accepted to access the box. The next time you go and you want to access your safety deposit box, guess what you got to do? You got to bring in 2 forms of ID. They will then issue you a 4-digit PIN number that will be used to access the box for the future. And we have to remember that banks are instructed to notify bank authorities for those people who are taking out more than $5,000. They have to be reported. A Citibank economist has said it's time to ban cash. They're trying to keep as much as they possibly can in the banking system. Why are they doing this at this time? Remember the bail-in documents? Because eventually what they're going to do is they're going to look inside the banks and they're going to look for the cash and they're going to bail themselves out. The United States, UK, Europe, New Zealand, Canada, they're all going to do it. They're getting ready. They're almost there. This is why all of this is happening at this time. Now, will this happen tomorrow? Will it happen in the fall? We don't know the exact time, but from the indicators, from everything they're doing, it seems like the situation is getting worse. They're imposing more rules, and they're trying to keep as much as they possibly can in the banking system. They don't want you to have cash outside of the banking system. This will not help them. Think about it. If everyone took their money out of the bank and they kept it in another place, maybe invested in gold and silver, kept cash on hand, when the bail-in came, there's nothing inside to bail it out. This is why they're trying to force everyone to keep their cash in the banks. And we see that the IMF, World Bank, there was a meeting. This is their annual spring meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. It was held in Washington over the weekend. It comprised of the treasurers and the central bankers, all the so-called important people. Well, we can see, while it was not officially on the agenda, the announcement of by China that it had secured the agreement of 57 countries to become founding members of its proposed Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank was a hot topic of discussion in the back rooms and corridors, especially at the World Bank. The fact remains that the U.S. is unable to offer any economic measures to boost the global economy in the way that it once could. This is under conditions where, as the main document prepared for the meeting, the IMF World Economic drew out lower growth and even stagnation is becoming the new normal. And the U.S. is losing their grip. And we see the IMF right now is saying, something? We might be looking at Plan B at this point in time. Because we have to remember, the IMF had an agreement with the U.S. back in 2010 where they said they would give up, the United States would give up their voting rights and they would help the emerging economies. Well, guess what? This never happened. The United States government central bankers kept their voting rights. Congress never voted on it. They went back on their promise. Zhu Min said, and he's part of the IMF banking system, Deputy Managing Director, said that during the 2015 IMF meeting that the institution had again expressed its disappointment that the U.S. continues to oppose the 2010 reform model and appealed again for the U.S. government and Congress to pass the proposal. At the same time, we are very clear that we can't keep waiting on the U.S. and its Congress. We're already launched Plan B, which was approved at the meeting, he said. Why are they doing this? Well, China and Russia created the BRIC system and the AIIB, which is going to help the emerging countries, give them loans. The IMF would sit on the sidelines. So we can see right now that their plan B is being pushed forward. What is plan B? Well, without the United States, they're going to be transferring funds from the developed countries and adding funds for new and the emerging economies, so that the new and emerging economies can reach the required standards as soon as possible. They are directly competing with the AIIB. They do not want to lose their market share to the AIIB. That's what's happening right now. The meeting also demanded that they accelerate this project of Plan B. The reform effort will be the biggest reorganization of the IMF since its founding over 70 years ago. After the reorganization, the 10 largest members of the fund will be in order: the US, Japan, China, Germany, France, UK, Italy, India, Russia, and Brazil. This list includes 4 of the 5 BRIC countries. The United States government is losing its grip. Everything is maneuvering away. The IMF could change the way the allocation of shares and voting rights are calculated. The IMF agreement does not specify how shares should be divided. And we can see right now, the central bankers, again, will do whatever they have to do to keep their system running. If they have to compete against another system, they will. They will not wait for the U.S. government. And of course, the U.S. government central bankers here do not want to give up what they have, and that's a very good thing because they're making tons and tons of money off of the rest of the world. And we can see that right now, they will push war. They don't care. They have no allegiance to any country, to any group of people. Their allegiance is to themselves. We see Russia and China making more deals between each other. Russia and China will set up a joint capital venture fund in the amount of about $200 million. A Russian-Chinese forum on opportunities for medium-sized and small businesses. Apart from the venture capital fund, the two countries will create a joint business incubator and a center of robotic technologies on the territory of Skolkovo Center for Innovations. Again, making economic deals around the world. We see Russia right now has increased its gold holdings by 1 million ounces in March, bringing its total reserves to nearly 40 million ounces or 1,238 metric tons. In recent years, they have consistently been buying around 300,000 ounces per month. Russian gold reserves are now the 5th largest national gold reserves in the world. And they're continually buying gold. China is continually buying gold. India is continually buying gold. All of these nations are stacking up on gold. They are getting ready for the dollar to completely collapse. And the best thing to have at this point in time is gold, silver, precious metals. We understand here in the United States, strange things are occurring. We understand Jade Helm, that's going to be occurring between July and September. We also understand that Walmart stores have been closed. Now they're in the band of Jade Helm. A lot of things are being talked about why this is happening. And one of the scenarios is that Walmart closed these stores because of a plumbing issue. But again, there was no plumbing permit basically issued. They didn't apply for one. So that seems a little strange. We also understand that they're saying that Walmart stores closed in retaliation to those employees who are picketing for for an increase in wages. The one store in particular, the Pico Rivera in California, has been at the forefront of wage and working conditions protests for the better part of 3 years. And they're saying that, yeah, they closed all of these stores to get back at the employees, which kind of doesn't really make sense. I mean, I know what they're trying to say, but would Walmart actually close their stores and give up the revenue from the stores just to get back at the employees? For 6 months? I mean, is this something a business would do? To me, it doesn't really make sense. I don't know if they go to that extreme, but people are out there saying that this is one of the reasons. The other reason is that maybe the government has paid them for the revenue for the 6 months, and they're going to use this for Jade Helm. At this point, we don't know for sure. There are a lot of theories out there, and everyone is pushing their theory, saying, yes, this is the reason, that's why the reason is. And all we can do is look at this and say, okay, let's use some common sense as a business. They would actually close 5 stores, give up the revenue, just to get back at people who are protesting in an increase of wages when they actually went ahead and gave those people an increase in wages. So something really doesn't make sense here. But we do understand that these areas are large enough, because they are the size of warehouses, to hold people. In the case of removing, dissidents, removing patriots, removing the sovereign citizens, they could be transporting them to these stores. But again, we'll have to wait and find out. We'll have to see if Jade Helm gets the green light to go live. Otherwise, if it doesn't, it's just a drill for something in the future to occur. But we see that here in the United States, as we know, the government officials have been trying to disarm the American people for quite a while. And for the most of 1990, the majority of the people were for gun control. But what is happening in the last couple of years, it's basically been flip-flop now. The balance of opinion now is the opposite. For the first time, more Americans say that that protecting gun rights is more important than controlling gun ownership. Most believe gun ownership, not gun control, makes people safer. I mean, look at our founding fathers and those people that have written about it. Noah Webster, an examination into leading principles of the federal Constitution in 1787. This is what he wrote in pamphlets about the Constitution. The Constitution shall never be construed to authorize Congress to prevent the people of the United States who are peaceably citizens from keeping their own arms. Thomas Paine. Are we at last brought to such a humiliating and debasing degradation that we cannot be trusted with arms for our own defense? Where is the difference between having our arms under our own possession and under our own direction, and having them under the management of Congress? If our defense be the real objective of having those arms, in whose hands can they be trusted with more propriety or equal safety to us as in our own hands? Patrick Henry. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia composed of the people trained to arms is the best and most natural defense of a free country. And we can see exactly what the founding fathers of this country meant when they wrote up the Second Amendment. Now, as we know, the government, the FBI, CIA, NSA, DHS, they don't want the people to implement encryption. They don't want people going around keeping their information a secret, their email a secret, their phone calls a secret, their texting a secret. And I think of encryption the same as having a safe in your house or locking your house. I mean, do you keep your house open so the government officials can walk in anytime they want to look through your personal papers? Do you keep your safe in your house open so the government officials can come in and take a look? The only way they can go ahead and take a look is to get a warrant. And they have to prove certain things to get this warrant. And the same thing holds true with encryption. Your communications are private. They should not be accessed. unless they have some type of warrant. If they have a warrant, then they can go to the company and get what they need. And of course, the FBI does not like this, CIA doesn't like this, NSA doesn't like this, because they love spying on the people. And the FBI is saying that we support robust encryption, only if we can hack it. Well, if you can hack it, you don't need a warrant. And this is what they're doing today with the Stingray devices. They're going ahead, accessing people's phone calls, reading their text messages, installing malicious software on the phones and computers without getting a warrant. This violates our Fourth Amendment. We even see a Manhattan District Attorney, Cyrus Vance Jr., wants total access to your personal effects. If it were up to Vance, you as an individual would have no right to secure your personal phone or computer data. Vance claimed that Apple's encryption software will make the iPhone the communication tool of terrorists. Apple has created a phone that is dark, that cannot be accessed by law enforcement. And it shouldn't be, even when a court has authorized us to look at its contents. They do not have the right to look at our communications. And if they really had a warrant, they would go to the company and they would have to honor the warrant to hand over the information. I mean, the company knows the method. They know the key. They created it. And of course, they could hand over that information. But the thing is, the FBI, NSA, CIA, government officials, they don't want to go through that. And we can see right now, this basically just violates the Fourth Amendment. It violates your rights. And as a people, we all need to stand up and protect the rights, because the government is not going to do that. The government is on the other side to violate them. The people need to stand up and say, no, you're violating our rights. This is not allowed. We don't need the Supreme Court. We don't need a court ruling. We have the document. We have the Constitution. We have the Bill of Rights. We don't need anything. All we need to do is stay together and say, no. That's it. The end. And if they can't abide by the Constitution and the contract we have, you're removed from your position. It's that simple. But of course, the government officials, they like to confuse the situation. They like to throw in terms, lawyer speak, babble about absolutely nothing. It's clear, it's easy, and the founding fathers made it this way so everyone could understand it. We see in Venezuela, as we know, back on March 9th, Obama issued an executive order imposing new sanctions against Venezuela officials, freezing their assets and banning them from entering the United States. Of course, they said they were a national security threat. And we can see right now that Chile does not share unilateral sanctions, and saying that basically these sanctions do not conform to international law and the United Nations Charter, and they will not be a part of this. And again, the only reason why they're pushing this on Venezuela is because they want to get into the country. They want a puppet regime. They want the oil. They want to put the US dollar on the oil. That's it. They've done this in many, many countries. If they can, in a peaceable way, they will try to make a deal with Venezuela and say, listen, use our dollar. We'll help your economy, but your oil has to be sold and you have to use the dollar. Will Venezuela go for this? Most likely not. It seems like they're making deals with China, making deals with Uruguay, making deals with many other countries to help the situation. We see Russia and Argentina. They're going to discuss increase bilateral food supplies. They're going to barter. They're going to trade. They've been doing this, and the volume of Russian-Argentina food trade in 2014 is around $1.3 billion. In light of souring relations with the West in 2014, we see Moscow is now increasing their deals in Latin America. And we can see a lot of the Latin American countries have been making deals with the BRICS, with China, and basically they're helping their economies out and they're bartering. We see the U.S. is going to give Ukraine $17.7 million of extra humanitarian aid. The U.S. government has agreed to give this, and Poroshenko was on the phone with Joe Biden, and they're going to send this over. They have also agreed and ready to give Ukraine loan guarantees worth about $1 billion as part of the financial support in 2015. Again, the coup d'etat went sour. They spent about $5 billion. They only got the west portion of Ukraine. They want the southeast. They want Crimea, and they're not going to stop. And this aid does not go to those regions. It goes to the west. That's where it's headed. We see it cost about $19 million for the training that's going on in Ukraine, for the training Fearless Guardian exercise, where they're training the troops. The U.S. is in there, Poland's in there, UK's in there, Canada's in there. What is all this training for? Well, we know what it's for. We know they're mounting a major offensive. And what's very odd, not really odd, which is enlightening, I should say, is that 50% of Europeans do not trust the mainstream media on the coverage of Ukraine. They're not buying it anymore. The majority of Europeans, UK, French, German, Greek residents among them, distrust the mainstream media of what's going on in Ukraine. Greeks appear to have showed their least faith in the domestic media, with a total of 76% saying they were fairly or totally distrustful of the mainstream reports in Ukraine. Germany, the same opinion was shared about 57% of respondents. Britain's only about 55%. And we see France around 47%. Everyone is waking up and saying, you know something? You've been lying to us. How many times now has Russia invaded Ukraine? I don't know, 80, 90 times? They must have so many tanks and so many military personnel in there. They must be running out of room inside of Ukraine in that southeastern region. It makes no sense. They have no satellite photos. They have no proof. They have absolutely nothing. And we can see they're continually using propaganda to convince everyone that Russia is the aggressor, when really it's Ukraine and the United States which is the aggressor. We see that Kiev right now is saying that there is no extreme right organizations in Ukraine whatsoever. There is no officially registered far-right organizations. Yeah, well, maybe they're not registered, but we've seen video. We know they're there. We know they exist. And of course, Ukraine is saying, absolutely not. We have no idea what anyone's talking about at this point in time. We don't see this whatsoever, but we see, and you can go right onto YouTube, you can see during the coup d'etat, you can see during the battles in Ukraine, you see all the extremists are out there. They're waving the flags. They have the armbands. We see Poland right now is going to be buying the Patriot air defense system. They looked at many different manufacturers, and of course they went with the U.S. Patriot air defense missile system. And the U.S. proposal has been found to be more profitable from the viewpoint of Poland's security and implementation of commitments with NATO. And the Patriot systems is being used in many different countries, so they decided to go along with it. And why is this all happening? Why is everyone beefing up their military assets? Because they're getting prepared for what is coming, and that is war. Now, out in Libya, we understand the situation is getting worse. Actually, the whole Middle East, the situation is getting worse. We see what's happening in Yemen. We see Libya, Lebanon, and Iraq. The people are rising up, and a lot of the people inside of these countries are very nervous. They want to get their families to safety, and we see a lot of these people are trying to escape through the Mediterranean, and we're seeing there's a lot of problems happening. While they're doing this, boats are sinking, they're capsizing, people are losing their lives. I think in the last case in the Mediterranean, about 700 people died during this. It seems the number of refugees drowning in the Mediterranean is going to reach a record high of about 30,000 by the end of 2015, and basically all of this is because of what the United States, UK, the coalition forces have done in the Middle East. All for the central banking system, to keep the petrodollar alive. And of course, when they went into these countries, they thought, we will get rid of the elected government, we'll put in a puppet regime, and that will be that. But we see that is not that, and it's getting worse as time goes on. And we see that U.S. military spending is up 45% over pre-9/11 levels, more than the next 7 countries combined. They are getting ready for war. And we can see they are pushing war. Look what is happening in Yemen. We see that a senior official in the Iran-allied Houthi movement said the movement of more U.S. warships into the waters off of Yemen escalates Washington's role in the Saudi-led campaign against the group. Yeah, they're getting ready for a major invasion in Yemen. We see the U.S. is beefing up their naval presence off of Yemen, and of course, they're saying that we're bringing these ships in because Iran is bringing in weapons to Yemen, helping the Houthis. But think about this. Why would Iran sail ships to Yemen with weapons when they know the U.S. fleet is right there? It's not like the U.S. fleet showed up yesterday. We know the aircraft carriers, we know the amphibious warships. They're all there. Why would they go right there and do it? They wouldn't. So what is Iran doing, and why is the propaganda coming out? Well, they're trying to blame all of this on Iran. They're using propaganda against Iran. And most likely, these ships are carrying humanitarian aid. And they don't want this to reach the shores of Yemen. They're trying to basically block off the Houthis, the people, to punish them, to make them say, we give. This is what's going on. And we can see the propaganda is flying all over the place that Iran is helping the Houthis, supplying them weapons. And this is why this story is out here. But it makes no sense. Why would Iran do this? They wouldn't. They wouldn't do it right out in the open if they were going to do it in the first place. And this is how you know this is complete propaganda. Of course, the U.S. is out there saying the purpose of the U.S. aircraft carrier presence in the Gulf of Aden is to protect navigation and commerce in the region. No, what they're really doing is they're keeping that choke point between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden open. They want the oil to continually flow through. They don't want to lose that area. And that is what they are guarding. That's it. Because if that is cut off, there's going to be major problems in this area. And this is why they can't give up Yemen. Because Yemen and Djibouti, they control that choke point right there. And we're seeing and we're hearing reports that Operation Decisive Storm in Yemen has ended. That means the air attacks have stopped for the time being. Why would they stop? They're saying that all goals now set by Decisive Storm operations have been achieved. These include the destruction of ballistic missiles the Houthis had taken control of. The decision to end the offensive comes following a request by the Yemeni government, according to the Saudi-led coalition spokesperson. The anti-Houthi campaign is now switching into a new phase, codename Restoring Hope. They always use these terms that really mean the opposite. Restoring Hope means invasion of Yemen and put down and control the situation. That's what it really means. Basically, the coalition are going to invade Yemen at this point in time. They're going to control the Houthis. And we can see they are definitely preparing for this. There has been very little progress made in pushing back the Houthi rebellion inside Yemen. The airstrikes weren't having the effect they thought it was going to have. Saudi Arabia right now has their National Guard, widely regarded as the kingdom's best equipped military ground force, to take part in the new campaign against the Houthis in Yemen. Basically, they're getting ready for a land war. They think they knocked out what they needed to knock out. They punished the people as much as they possibly could punish them with airstrikes, and they don't want to destroy the entire infrastructure. And now they're going to try a land war. How is this going to turn out? Most likely, not that well. And we can see the U.S. is getting ready to get involved in this. The Iranian ships are parked right outside. Iran is calling for a complete ceasefire. China is calling for a complete ceasefire. And we can see at this point that this can really start something huge in this area. And we know they will then maneuver to the next country and the next country to try to control what is going on. This is going to turn out to be an all-out war unless it could be stopped. Maybe Russia will step in. They've stepped in many, many times before. But if they just let the U.S. go off and the coalition forces go off, once, if they can, capture this area, they will then maneuver to Libya. They will then maneuver to Lebanon and do the same thing. At least try to. But I can see the people there. They're ready for a ground fight. They're ready to attack. And you have to remember, Saudi Arabia and the other coalition forces, Yemen has never done anything to them. They just went ahead and invaded a country. That's all that has happened, just like what's happening in Iraq, the same thing happening in Lebanon, Libya, and Syria. Assad was out there and he has slammed France for alleged terrorist support in his country, saying Paris is not independent and has no weight and no credibility in the face of Washington. France has turned into a kind of satellite for American foreign policy in the region and claimed Western tactics led to terrorists infiltrating Syria. Yeah. At this point in time, we know that the Islamic State basically is the proxy army for the United States, France, UK, and the rest of the coalition forces. All of this was created to create chaos in the region, to get that authorization for war passed so they can go into any country that has the Islamic State in there. They wanted to include the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, and it's still pending in Congress. We see they're continually using false flags and trying to use the Islamic State to convince everyone, they're terrorists, they're beheading people, they're committing atrocities. Well, Saudi Arabia beheads many, many people that don't agree with the government. Nothing is said about that. But it seems like it's losing its shock value. People are ignoring the Islamic State because they're starting to realize that most of the information coming out is from SITE, which is run by Rita Katz, which is a Mossad propaganda mouthpiece, and most of it is fake. Do they kill people? Of course they do. But a lot of the propaganda is fake. A lot of it is to try to convince people that they're scary, they're a force to be reckoned with, and this is why we need to go into Syria. And we can see right now, the United States government central bankers, they are definitely planning something very, very big because they're starting the propaganda against Assad once again. Warships are being sailed into the Mediterranean. Fighting is happening in Yemen. This will spread into the other countries because you have to remember, they need to keep the oil and the dollar being used as the sales of the oil out to other countries together. They cannot let the people take over the countries and sell the oil not using the dollar. And they see that this part is slipping away. And they need to put back the puppet governments. They need to make sure they have the choke point between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. They need to make sure that is cleared so the oil continually flows. And once they assure that that has been done, they will then move northward to the other countries and eventually end up in Syria to get Assad, because as we know, that is their main goal. The goal has always been the same. The tactics might have changed. And this could ignite World War III, because as we know, this entire system is collapsing. And they're running out of time, and they know it. We can see the IMF is maneuvering to Plan B right now. The AIIB is competition for the World Bank. We see that the Greek exit is coming. This entire system is held together with glue and tape. One small little thing, the whole thing comes crumbling down. And they want to control it to make sure they can blame this on another country or another group. Because if it comes down on its own, they'll have no one to blame. And the people will look at the central banks, will look at their governments and say, you know something, we're done with this. And how do they start a war? How do they avert everyone's attention to something else? They can't. And they don't want this to happen. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.